Hey Cohort 4, it's me, Rachel. I put together a video presentation which basically outlines my portion of the readings for our group project. Forgive me if you see me kind of looking down. I have notes that I'm looking at, so I want to make sure I don't leave anything out. But my group read the book Savage Inequalities, and we broke the book into chapters, so I was responsible for 2 out of 6 of the chapters. The book is by Jonathan Kozol, and it pretty much examines inequalities of our American education system. He basically presents firsthand accounts, just his experiences in various school settings, whether they were disadvantaged students or the elite or the affluent communities. And with doing that, he discovered some major differences between the education that was provided to each group. Many of the disadvantaged schools lacked qualified instructor. They didn't have sufficient utilities. I mean, the buildings were basically on their last leg. Whereas some of the affluent communities, or not some, the affluent communities, schools were very much up to par, best instructors, resources that basically provided their students a good environment or a successful environment. The fact that the disadvantaged communities had these sort of dire settings basically it plays a role in the fact that many of our disadvantaged students have this achievement gap, and the way it's presented in Kozol's book, it's more than likely because of the environment that they're being educated in. What's interesting is many people still perceive that the inequality in education no longer exists and is something of the past. So for that reason, a lot of these issues are not addressed. In this book and with the other readings that I completed, there were pretty much 3 main themes that we came up with. One is that there's a general acceptance of inequality in education. The other would be that the injustice or the inequality still exists and it continues. And last but not least, many of the affluent people in a way protect their society. They kind of continue the inequality in order to protect their society. So just some examples of the things that took place in the readings that I completed in Kozol. He had visited a New York school, specifically a Bronx school district. And these are 2 schools in the same school district. One was identified as Public School 24, which was located in Riverdale. This was the more affluent school. Basically, this school was very well kept. It was surrounded by, $500,000 homes. The school served about 825 students, and I want to say the maximum population was like 900, so they definitely were under their maximum. The school actually was divided into 2 separate groups, and you see a lot of segregation running through each of these scenarios. But this particular school was separated into 2 schools. One school served about 130 minority children, primarily African American and Hispanic. They were of low socioeconomic status, and they all had been classified as educatable mentally retarded or trainable mentally retarded. The book described maybe a handful of minorities in a traditional classroom setting. Other than that, all the minorities were grouped as mentally retarded. On the flip side of that, there were classroom settings, or I'm sorry, the other schools served about 700 students who were primarily white and a few Asian students. and they were basically mainstreamed. There were honors programs and just various resources to help these students be successful. On the other side of town, there was Public School 26, and this school was actually situated in a skating rink, a former skating rink. It was next door to a mortician's office. When Mr. Kozal was trying to locate the school didn't even have any signage. People basically described it as being by the mortician office. It was kind of situated in the back, really hidden from the streets, so you wouldn't even know that it was there. It didn't have, I mentioned that there was no signage. The school basically encompassed about 1,300 students. The maximum capacity was 900, so it was definitely overcrowded. 90% of the children were either African American or Hispanic, while the other 10% were Middle Eastern, Asian, and some white. The school had minimal windows, self-made classrooms, basically just dire conditions. There was a need for repairs. There weren't enough textbooks or supplies, and it lacked the support and the funding from our local government agency. Again, this is just two separate descriptions of schools within the same district who receive different funding and different resources for their students. Stepping away from Mr. Kozal, basically all of his stories, the entire book consisted of several stories and observations of visits he made to various schools, and they pretty much all represent affluent schools, which were full of resources and top students, versus those schools for the disadvantaged. The other article I read, 3 additional articles, my supporting articles. One was called The Social Prerequisite of Success. Can college structure reduce the need for social know-how? This was an interesting article. It was focusing on the community college level, and it was talking about the fact that students need a certain skill or a certain social know-how to succeed in the community college environment, especially those students from low socioeconomic background, because they may not possess those skills. There were 7 barriers that were identified. There's the, bureaucratic hurdle. There's, confusing choices, student-initiated guidance, limited counseling services, poor advice from staff, slow detection of detrimental mistakes, and poor handling of conflict demands. These were all of the barriers that were that may pose a problem for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So the article was just trying to capture ways to help these students be successful. Well, first it identified these barriers and how they could affect these students' success, and then it looked at other models and things that could be implemented in order to make these students be successful. So basically they looked at the occupational colleges models. Those colleges have created programs that students can easily understand, basically master and negotiate if they need to. They don't need to know how college works in order to successfully complete these programs, which based on the author's research, this is a direction that may be able to help students be successful at the community college level. I did feel like this was relative to what Kozal was talking about as well. Obviously, the basics start in the K through 12 setting, and if you don't receive those basics, you may be moved along the system, but someone has to come in and fill in the gaps. And in these cases, many disadvantaged students will go to the community college level looking for that sort of support. The other article I read was called Gateways and Gatekeepers, Moving Beyond the Access Saga Toward Outcome Equity. This particular article was, about it's basically posing the question, is the community college a gateway or a gatekeeper? And the article basically demonstrates that it's a little bit of both. Community colleges are being pressured to improve their articulation agreements with universities in order to increase the transfer rates, but at the same time, there's educational policy in place that, for example, related to remediation, that tightens the requirements for students, and it doesn't allow them to progress to the university level. Again, the disadvantaged students lack preparedness, so they end up being a candidate for these remedial courses, but they're not successfully passing them or being able to move through to the next level. Just some statistics that was shared, approximately 60% of community college students do not enroll in remedial courses. So the fact of the matter is, these disadvantaged students are coming to the institution, they're taking courses, but they're not taking the necessary courses that they need in order to progress. And that could be for various reasons. It could be intimidation, it could be lack of knowledge, it just depends. So 60% of these students are going to community college, but they're not even taking the courses that are necessary for them to progress. So that's pretty gruesome, so to speak. Consequently, those students are guided into kind of like a workforce training. So it's more about the promotion of our economic development and increasing, the non-professional occupations, which of course somebody has to do it. I don't think the authors are knocking that, but it's going to show you that these students from this disadvantaged background are not receiving access to higher education. They're coming into the system, there are no support systems in place, therefore they're being transitioned to a workforce training program. Last but not least, I read an article, Community Colleges, New Environments, New Directions. This particular article basically touched on more of the systematic impediments that are implemented by our federal government that basically impede a person's, not success, but it basically impedes them from going through, progressing through higher education. That'd be a way to put it. The federal government had promoted this work first philosophy, and basically anyone that was participating in a welfare reform program was encouraged to participate sort of like in training programs versus classes that would be applicable towards a degree. And this, again, was similar to Ghazal. Individuals that basically can benefit the most from the access are not given the opportunity to receive those resources and take advantage of them. So these people who may be receiving welfare or are part of some sort of welfare reform program is not necessarily encouraged to go to college and, sort of break the mold or change their situation. They are encouraged to take part in work programs that would basically put them in an environment to do like a non-professional occupation. So I guess overall, looking at this, there are various themes of inequity, the themes of, the haves versus the have-nots. What I took from this is that inequity definitely exists, it's continuing, and the only way that we will be able to break away from this or to stop this would be to change the policies that are in effect, and also receive the support of the community, really getting those individuals that may be affluent to understand that, equity is important, across the board, and, there can be good schools for everyone. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say. No, I think that's it. I know my group has an additional presentation to go along with this. I'm doing a separate video presentation, obviously, because I'm not going to be in class this weekend. But this is an interesting topic. I hope you all enjoy it, and I will see you next semester. Bye.